This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. It's April 1st, 2025, and on this day 23 years ago, that was the initial due date for a major expansion of WPLN. For months, we planned it to be the day we turned on our AM station. Now, I was also pregnant at the time, and it was my son's due date, too. I remember thinking it would be really good if somehow both of those babies were born on a day other than April Fool's. Well, sure enough, that's what happened. My son was born a day early. The station, as I recall, held off a week. But due dates aside, WPLN AM launched a new way of thinking at this organization. For decades up until that point, we were a radio station with a single signal that tried to provide a wide range of programming in that one spot. The model worked on the idea that many different kinds of people with different kinds of lifestyles and interests would come to the same place to find smart programming. And that was pretty much emblematic of the thinking behind most broadcasting at the time. At WPLN, that looked like news in some weekday hours, classical music in others, and weekend programming that ran the gamut from the old-time radio show-influenced Prairie Home Companion to automotive repair call-in show Car Talk. But in 2002, by adding a new radio frequency, we were able to start giving listeners two choices at any one time. It gained following pretty quickly, which is kind of amazing for an AM station in the 21st century. But people were hungry to have a 24-hour news option. And then we started streaming our audio online. We added another FM frequency to spin classical out into a standalone service. We switched to digital signals with subchannels. The classical music moved on to one of those, and the second FM became WNXP, our music discovery station. Audio of individual stories became available for on-demand listening. Podcasts became a place where we expanded our investigative reporting with more in-depth coverage than we could air on the radio. We launched a daily newsletter, the Nashvillager, and from that, we spun out this podcast. In fact, we ended up with so many various options that the AM station that started this diversification of offerings became unnecessary. People weren't listening to it anymore, so we sold it. All that to say, the underlying ethos now is that Nashville Public Radio is an organization that tries to meet people in our community where they are. We don't expect everyone to find us in the same place anymore. We go to the virtual and information spaces where you want to be, and we find you there. I'm sure we'll touch on this some tomorrow during a special episode of our daily show, This is Nashville, which is digging into the station's history. I'm going to be a guest. There will be a chance to call in and share your memories of listening, and I would really, really love to hear a podcast listener or two on the show. That's going to be a live broadcast at noon. And another option is to call and record a message ahead of time. The number is 615-751-2500. I've been at Nashville Public Radio a long time now, and I found that one of the coolest things about working in public broadcasting is that you, our audience, really do care and want to share the ways that you care. You buy into the idea that there's value to sharing this information with the community. And about 10% of you also take this step to place a dollar amount on that value, or at least a dollar amount on what you can pitch in. Look at all we do with just 10% financial support. Look at all the ways we've grown with 10%. Are you in that elite group? Or are you in the 90% with a great opportunity to become a little more involved, a little more invested than you are now? Go to our website, WPLN.org. Click on the red heart next to the words Give Now and see the thank you gifts that are available. Pick what level of giving is right for you. And thank you. In just a few minutes, the international side of country music. That's coming up after the newscast.
There's nothing quite like Nashville Public Radio.
No one in the world, anytime, ever has tuned more pianos than me. you're sitting with the person that's tuned the most pianos in the history of man.
That's Music Citizens, the most compelling and fun music journalism in all of Music City. I'm Tony Gonzalez, news director in our local newsroom, where I also find so much heart and empathy in our stories. Like when a reporter spends months learning what it's like for a family as they move out of a dilapidated apartment.
There's an opportunity for mamas with 5 and 6 kids to have a washer and a dryer. It'd be worth the move just by itself.
When you support WPLN, you're sending reporters into the field to witness what's really going on. WPLN is also unique because we're funded by you. So I'm asking you to donate because this city deserves great journalism. WPLN.org/give.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. The National Weather Service has now confirmed 4 tornadoes touched down during Sunday night's storms. All of them were in a cluster of neighboring counties, Murray, Hickman, and Humphreys. The strongest one occurred around Hampshire. That is estimated to have been an EF2, meaning the wind speeds were up to 135 miles per hour. There were 2 in the next category down, topping out at 110 miles per hour. Those EF1 tornadoes were in Mount Pleasant and McEwen. And experts have determined there was an EF0 in Fairview. That had a maximum wind speed of 85 miles per hour. Tennesseans can lose their jobs for petitioning the government. That's the ruling of the state Supreme Court. The decision was issued last week in the case of a woman who was fired from her job at health insurer Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. The reason? She emailed a state legislator to express her opposition to the company's vaccine mandate. Her message gained attention because it was read aloud on the floor of the state house. After she was fired, the woman sued, claiming the company violated her right to petition. The state's high court disagreed, ruling that provision of the state constitution only constrains the government. It found that the Constitution does not place limits on private employers in a state with at-will employment laws. As the Trump administration slashes federal funding, Nashville has been bracing for impact. Now WPLN's Cynthia Abrams reports Metro's public health department is facing staff cuts after the CDC eliminated 3 grants last week.
7 to 8 positions will be lost. It's the first instance of federal cuts leading to job loss in Nashville's city government. The grants also supported temporary housing and health literacy, and the health department had been using the funds to hold measles vaccine clinics as cases pop up across the state. Medical Services Director Dr. Joanna Shawkai says Metro lost 2 days' worth of clinics.
But when these things happen, all of a sudden, there are services that suffer and lives are impacted negatively.
Nashville officials are considering suing the Trump administration over the health funds. 2 weeks ago, the city filed suit over 2 terminated infrastructure grants. Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
Nashville's Office of Homeless Services will clear out Old Tent City. The encampment near the Cumberland River and Interstate 24 has been a community for unhoused Nashvillians for over 40 years. It's also the site of a planned city park. 6 months ago, Metro government demolished the largest structures in Old Tent City, citing safety concerns. But until now, the encampment was allowed to remain open. The Office of Homeless Services says it informed Old Tent City residents yesterday afternoon. The department says it will work with nonprofits to offer residents assistance finding affordable housing, substance abuse treatment, moving supplies, and accommodations for pets. Gallatin is working to create a searchable database of the city's cemetery and the roughly 8,000 people buried there. Volunteers and city employees are working together to catalog names and grave sites. Jeff Henschel is chairman of the cemetery committee. He tells the Gallatin News that historic records and maps of the cemetery are incomplete and inaccurate. He says because of that, they're uncovering locations and names of people buried there as they go along. Volunteers are also working to clean and restore the older gravestones, some of which date back over 200 years. Anyone interested in volunteering can reach out to the Gallatin mayor's office. A Memphis state senator wants to make a disciplinary board for Tennessee district attorneys. Brent Taylor is a Republican representing parts of Shelby County and Memphis. The Commercial Appeal reports he plans to ask the Tennessee Supreme Court to create a board to investigate complaints against district attorneys and issue sanctions or even remove them. He pointed out that a similar board already exists for judges. For now, Taylor says he's asking the court to create a committee to look into 3 specific DAs with allegations of misconduct. That includes Shelby County DA Steve Mulroy, who's a Democrat. Taylor has made repeated efforts to get Mulroy removed from office. Now that flowers are blooming and grass is starting to grow again, the city of Brentwood is urging residents to limit their watering to certain days. Properties with odd-numbered street addresses should limit irrigation to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Even numbers get Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Brentwood Water Services hopes the voluntary program will spread water usage throughout the week to ensure there are no problems meeting demands during warmer months. These days, country celebrity bars dominate Lower Broadway. Last week, Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre announced they're opening their own downtown Nashville spot. Senior music writer Julie Height has more.
Just as country stars name their establishments for their hits, the Still Gin Lounge by Dre and Snoop nods to one of the duo's mid-90s classics. What's surprising is that the 2 icons of West Coast hip-hop are opening their bar's first location in Nashville, where it will stand apart in the country-focused tourist district. In last year's Making Noise podcast, producer and DJ A.B. Eastwood expressed his desire to see a downtown spot devoted to rap and R&B.
I can't wait for whenever it is a time that a black act can demand that type of respect from the city.
Eastwood was envisioning a space for Nashville's homegrown hip-hop scene. So far, though, Snoop's mostly forged connections with rap-adjacent country stars. What the lounge means locally will become clearer after Still Gin opens on April 4th. Julie Height, WPLN.
Just how did Music City develop an iconic and quirky neighborhood of recording studios, label offices, and publishing houses? A new oral history collection at the Nashville Public Library has recorded the story behind Music Row. 35 industry insiders sat down for interviews. Excerpts are available online, or you can hear the full recordings at the downtown library. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. The country music industry has long operated as though Nashville is the center of the country music universe. El Salvadoran-born, Nashville-based country artist Angie K is complicating that picture with her insight into industry boundaries, national borders, and cultural barriers. Her new EP reflects the multicultural artistic identity she's refined over the years, and she's just launched a campaign to turn Nashville's attention to her fellow Latin country artists all over the world. Senior music writer Julie Height sat down with Angie to hear how she arrived at her vision.
Country artists often paint fairly generic pictures of small-town American roots, but Angie K brings a richer sense of context to her origin story. Her telling of family history includes rural settings as well as border crossings into different cultural and political realities.
So my mom grew up in New Mexico. My dad is from El Salvador, and they met at University of New Mexico. I can talk about this now because there's been a little bit of a change in politics down there, but my dad's dad was kidnapped, and that's why they had to come back down. And there's a lot more to that story, but I'll kind of leave it at that. And that's why we all were born there.
Angie even wrote a song about migration, forging family ties on her mother's side.
Many years ago, in the town of Laredo, at an old rodeo, a young vaquero from Colorado met a girl from Mexico. She was the daughter of a humble ranchero, and he couldn't keep his eyes off of her.
The story of cross-cultural romance she tells in the lyrics has an epic, almost folkloric quality that echoes the spirit of Mexican corridos. And in the flamenco guitar figures weaving around and through the arrangement, you can hear how deftly she centers Latin sounds in her vision of country music. As the family moved from El Salvador to Georgia, Angie's parents supplied country touchstones and paid for her voice lessons, on the condition that she take her singing studies seriously and practice on her own regularly on top of required rehearsals. But she improvised her own savvy path into a music career. She was working at a salvage yard when she got the idea of searching for a gig performing on a cruise ship. Then she booked her own tour of dive bars, crashing on couches along the way, and went on TV singing competition The Voice in 2016.
So if you ever worry about where you're walking now, baby, let me tell you something.
That show-stopping moment made 3 of the show's 4 judges, Blake Shelton, Adam Levine, and Pharrell, turn their chairs and try to recruit her for their teams. Back then, she was still going by her full name, Angie K, and she chose Shelton, the one country star in the mix, as her coach. After Angie got to Nashville, she aimed for a breakthrough at country radio and streaming platforms with a danceable bilingual single she recorded with one of the biggest producers in town. For an independent release, it did respectably well, but it wasn't what the industry defined as a hit, and she came face to face with Blanket Bias. To Nashville, a country single by one artist with Latin roots stood in for all Latin country performers.
I remember hearing that it was their thought that failed to break me, that they were less likely to choose other songs with Spanish in it. It's hard to even talk about, but it's important to talk about, but it broke my heart.
Angie didn't allow that to limit her approach to writing and recording her new self-titled EP. In fact, it's her most musically expansive and emotionally complex project to date. There's rocking honky-tonk heartache,
So pour me a drink, pour me another if I ain't getting over her. I'm going under, I'm going under. Call me
a slow-burning ballad about savoring lasting connection,
But we only have what we have. We only got what we've got. Can't stop, fast forward, or rewind. Gotta learn to turn a little into a lot. Nobody.
and sultry Spanish guitar-accented reassurance of romantic devotion.
Contigo me quedaré, mi corazón para siempre. On the edge we won't break. With you my heart will always.
The way that she moves between English and Spanish conveys a feeling so fervent that one language simply can't contain it.
If I tried right now to write a song that included my Latin heritage, I don't think it would be as good as if I just wrote how I was feeling that day and said, you know what, I really want to say this phrase in Spanish. What I did is I took the pressure off myself. There's so much of an identity crisis to people that are from different countries that live here, because multicultural isn't something that comes naturally for Americans to understand necessarily. But yeah, I try not to think too hard about having to represent a bunch of people, and instead hoping to send the message that you can represent yourself in any way you want.
Last year, as a member of the Equal Access program that makes way for marginalized voices in country music, Angie witnessed Karin Leon, a superstar of both country and Mexican regional music like banda and norteño, make his debut on the Grand Ole Opry.
I sit backstage and I watched just an entire crowd of what looked like Mexican vaqueros watching him and just yip and hollering.
Mil gracias, Nash. Los queremos.
When he finished his two songs, I mean, they were just screaming, otra, otra, to the point where the Opry was like, please sing another one. He turned the entire Opry into this whole other demographic. Karin he's like, I don't know how to say it another way, he's Justin Bieber status to the rest of the world.
An analytical problem solver by nature, Angie contemplated the divide between Leon's massive enthusiastic audience and Nashville's country music industry, and decided to take action. In January, a month before her EP came out, she launched the Country Latin Association with a clear sense of the issues her advocacy would tackle.
I mean, there's so many people right now that have massive followings that are in country music, but we're not hearing their name because they don't even know about the industry here. They're just out there getting their crazy numbers and doing their little tours in Brazil or in Spain or wherever they are, and we have no idea. And what if we did? What if we made the world a little smaller?
took note of the strategies that enable equal access to make headway in the industry. Her new organization's website speaks a language that Nashville understands: chart stats. And they show that Brazilian stars Ana Castela and Jorge Mateos are right up there with Leon.
3 of the top 10 artists in country music are Latin, and I'd be shocked if the CEO of Sony Music Nashville, of Universal Music, of Warner knew their names. There's a market now. It's not one we have to create.
Follow the Country Latin Association on Instagram and TikTok, and you'll be introduced to the music of a different artist every day. There's a podcast, too, Latina in Nashville, hosted by another artist, Andrea Vasquez. And Angie's approach to all these platforms makes clear that these are distinct voices working in different traditions. In other words, they're not a monolith.
The goal is to start creating stories so that instead of people that are in big positions have an easy way of looking at the differences between like a Cuban heritage or a Mexican heritage or Salvadorian heritage. It's important to hear the story so we start understanding the nuances, because if you don't understand the nuances, you'll never be able to market a Latin artist.
This is just the first phase of Angie's plan. She's got her eye on sponsorships, showcases, increasing the Country Music Association's Spanish-speaking membership, and so much more.
That's a massive dream. I hate saying it out loud, but like, I'm just gonna do my little steps and see where that takes us in the next year.
And Angie K's ambition should not be underestimated. Julie Height, Nashville Public Radio.
Drove out to a field off of Highway 9. Opened the bottle and cursed out the sun. Drank till the tears came.
Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported, and you can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.